I talked about the glamorous image of Mercedes-Benz in America and Hollywood in particular, and the cars that are behind me are two examples of that. Celebrities were very well known for liking Mercedes-Benz. That car right there is a 300 SC Cabriolet from 1956, and it was originally owned by Clark Gable. It's one of 49 fuel-injected models ever built. It's a very special car, and it's owned by Bruce Meyer, so it's just phenomenal. It's a fantastic color, by the way, too. This one is a 230 SL, 1964, and the 230 SL, the Pagoda, the W113 as it was known, was very stylish, very much a status symbol in the 1960s for stars, definitely. This particular 230 SL was actually owned by Walt Disney, and it was his personal car that he bought. He rented it to the studio after that to actually be used in a movie called That Darn Cat, which I haven't seen yet. It's still owned by his family. It was painted red at some point. It was originally white. And it's, again, a fantastic original example of a car that's actually still in the original family. That's hard to see with a car of this age. The 230 SL, 250 SL, 280 SL, all the Pagodas were designed by Paul Brock, who was a designer who worked at many different companies, including BMW actually. And he was responsible for the look of the brand in the 1960s. And that also translated to the 600, which was the flagship, the absolute top model of Mercedes-Benz from 1963 until 1981. That's a very long run, but despite that, they only made 2,677 of these during that time. It was available as a short wheelbase sedan, a Pullman limousine, Pullman named after the luxurious train coach company of the 20th century, and the Pullman Landaulet, which is this. Only 59 of these were ever ordered. And it was so exclusive that it was not even on the sales catalog. It was that secret, sort of. And royalty, heads of state, diplomats, people like this had these cars. The Shah of Iran had a lot of them. And it was basically the best of the best. The 600 in all its forms was extremely advanced. It had a closed-loop hydraulic system that allowed you to roll up the windows up and down and close the trunk with just a push of a button, and do all sorts of things that were unheard of in 1963. Power brakes, unheard of in 1963 for most cars. And it was just extremely, had air suspension, very, very advanced for its day. Everyone knows the G-Wagen today as a status symbol, as something that is flashy, has AMG trim, Brabus, 6-wheeled. You've seen all sorts of crazy versions over the years. This is where it all started. This bare bones, utilitarian vehicle designed only to go off-road, and it has an interesting story. So in the 1970s, one of the largest individual shareholders of Daimler-Benz AG was the Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. And he was a car guy, he loved cars, he had a huge car collection, and he particularly loved Mercedes-Benz. He approached the company and he asked them, I want you to make a specialty vehicle for my military. They ran with it, and they've instead developed a civilian utility vehicle based on his request that became the G-Wagen. The real irony is that by the time that this came out in 1979, the Shah had already been overthrown, so he never actually got to see his request be fulfilled in the way that he wanted. But he is the one to thank for the G-Wagen as we know it today, because if that request hadn't gone through, we wouldn't have what we know as the G-Wagen today. I love this color. It's the press color when the G-Wagen originally came out. It's called Cactus Green 880, and I wouldn't have one in any other color if I was going to pick one. Speaking of cutting-edge cars, this is the 6.9, and when it came out in 1975, it was the fastest four-door sedan in the world. It was a big deal. It may not look it, because that's kind of the idea. The S-Class started officially with the W116 generation, and this is basically the top model of that. The 450 SEL was already the top model, but then they took the engine from the 600, the V8, and they enlarged it to 6.8 liters. I don't know why they called it a 6.9, and they put it in this. This thing had a dry sump lubrication system, self-leveling suspension, hydropneumatic, all four wheels, as well as a ABS that was available from 1978, the first in a Mercedes-Benz. So truly a groundbreaking car. If you've ever seen C'était un Rendezvous, it's a short film filmed in Paris. There's a Ferrari, it's just a POV shot of a Ferrari racing through the early morning streets of Paris. At dangerous speeds, everybody thinks that was a Ferrari because you hear the sounds of a Ferrari, but it was actually dubbed in. That car was actually this car. This was the one that was racing through those streets, and it was able to keep up with those cars. So very exclusive car, very expensive at the time, $50,000, $230,000 adjusted for inflation today. And this one was imported by Roger Penske when it was new. So very, very much an important car. This is our high performance section. And when we talked about the early race cars in the 1930s and then the 300 SL, all of those were extremely successful. But in 1955, something big happened at Le Mans, and it's known as the 1955 Le Mans disaster, where a Mercedes-Benz race car collided into another one, flew into the crowd, and killed over 80 people. It was a tragic accident that basically, became the deadliest incident in motorsports history. And Mercedes-Benz claims that all along that they had been planning on exiting racing anyway, regardless of that incident, and they had been planning on focusing instead on putting more R&D into their production road cars. Everybody else claims no, obviously an event like that would have influenced them to exit completely, so it was probably that did it. Regardless of what the case was, I would argue that if that change in focus hadn't happened, then none of the cars that were just being talked about right now would have come to fruition, and honestly, this exhibit may not exist today. So this section features homologation cars, features actual race cars, features static show cars, features experimental prototypes, features AMG cars, features exotic cars from the modern day, and it's basically an all-encompassing look at what stands for high performance in the mid-20th century and onwards. We can't talk about high performance and Mercedes-Benz without talking about AMG. And AMG was founded in the mid-60s by two former Mercedes-Benz engineers who, because of the change in focus away from motorsports, were dissatisfied with the way that the company was going, and they wanted to really be able to build faster engines and make faster cars. And so they split off and they started working out of a garage in 1967, and they called it AMG. AMG arrived at the world stage in 1971 at the 24 Hours of Spa with this car. It was a 300 SEL 6.3, which AMG had modified to become a 6.8 really. You know, if you actually were there that day, you would have seen all sorts of small, nimble sports cars from all these different manufacturers, and then here arrives this big, heavy executive sedan. People were laughing at it, people were mocking it. They called it the Red Pig, which actually is the nickname that it's known by now, in sort of spite of that, because it blew away everybody. It surprised everybody. Despite its weight, despite its size, it was able to defeat the competition and show that it was AMG's work on the motor that had really been able to do that, and to make such a heavy car be able to win a race like that. So that's what started AMG in terms of making it famous. In the 80s, AMG sort of became known as a place where you could send your Mercedes-Benz to enhance it in all sorts of ways, not just visually, but also mechanically, increasing the size of the motor, boring out the cylinders. This is a 500 SEC. It's the first S-Class coupe, and it is very special because not only was it the top of the line car when it came out, but AMG could do all sorts of things to this car. This wide body kit, these bends in the fenders, these flare arches, all of these are done by AMG. The Penta wheels, the all white treatment. This was very 80s, it was very Miami Vice, frankly. The motor was increased to 5.4 liters, and this was actually the press car that was featured in Auto Week in 1984. So definitely a very special car. AMG in the 80s was also synonymous with the Hammer. The Hammer was basically the predecessor to the E-Class sedan, the W124 chassis. which was available as a coupe, a sedan, and a wagon in those days, but had never been offered with a V8 before. And that's what AMG did. They decided to put in the biggest V8 that they could find from Mercedes-Benz, 5.6 liters, and then also bore it out to 6 liters. A 6-liter 4-cam engine was just insane at the time. And AMG at this time was a la carte. You would send them your car and you would tell them what you wanted. There were no packages really in the way that car companies have these days. And what one specific customer did in Canada was he sent a wagon, a 300 TD turbo, that's a diesel wagon, to AMG, and he said, make this a Hammer. The Hammer got its name apparently because in the automotive press somebody commented on how when you floored it, it threw you back in your seat like a hammer, and that's what gave it its name. It's known as one of the only, if not the only, Hammer wagon in existence. There were only 30 Hammers built in total, approximately, and it's definitely a very special car to see today. Now, a common misconception is that Mercedes-Benz stopped racing altogether after the '55 Le Mans disaster, and that's not quite true. They did stop racing in F1, and they did stop racing on a large scale like that, but they had continued racing in rally and touring car championships and things like that. But in the 80s, they started to actually dip their feet back into racing on a more major level with DTM and as well as with the World Sports Car Championship. So the two cars behind me are, well, this one is the homologation version of the 190e Evo 2, as it's known, and it's only one of about 500 ever built. It's a very, very highly desirable car these days because of a certain generation that grew up watching these and racing neck and neck with the first generation BMW M3, the E30, and Mercedes and AMG, they were finally able to beat BMW in 1992 after a few years of really competing heavily with them. So this is definitely a very important part of the chapter of Mercedes-Benz in motorsports. This right here is also an important car from that era. It's the 1989 Sauber Mercedes C9. Sauber Motorsports was a German racing team that was taking part in the World Sports Car Championship and had been using Mercedes engines. And then in 1988, Mercedes-Benz acquired a stake in the team and basically started to improve them even more. So this is the more improved version of the earlier Sauber C9, not the Sauber Mercedes C9. And this car, because of its improved reliability, was able to absolutely dominate the championship and was very successful for the company and helped it to continue to the 90s, where we, saw Mercedes-Benz finally have the courage, if you will, to go back into F1, partner with McLaren, and basically lead us into the modern era where they are so successful, and they have been so successful for many years. Now, in the 1970s, Mercedes-Benz was also experimenting a lot, and not in the way that a lot of people were in that era. They were experimenting with power, and this is the C111. It started in 1969 and went through several different iterations. So the C111 1, 2, 3, 4. And what the C111 was really was a rolling test bed, a rolling laboratory for trying out different types of power. So the original one had a rotary engine. Then they went to a gas V8. Then they tried a diesel motor. Then they tried a turbo diesel motor. All of these were super successful in different ways and showed the company what they could try and put into their passenger cars. So they set world records at the Nardo Ring in Italy, and people were so enthusiastic about these cars that they actually wanted to buy them, but Mercedes-Benz ultimately decided not to offer it for sale and just keep it as an experimental prototype. The C111 and the C112 behind me are two of the cars that are here from the Mercedes-Benz Museum in Stuttgart, and it's a rare chance to be able to see them in person on this side of the globe. Designers were hugely influential in shaping the way that Mercedes-Benz looked over the years, and one of the most important designers was Bruno Sacco. He was the head of styling at Daimler-Benz from 1975 until 1999, and he actually begun his career in 1958 at the company. So really a long-lasting influence on the way that Mercedes-Benz looked. During his time, one of the design features that came out was these grooved or ribbed taillights. And the reason that these were actually developed was not just for aerodynamics, but it was also for safety. Safety was a very big focus for Mercedes-Benz, and especially on the road cars. And the idea was that on all cars pretty much at that time, the taillights were flat. They were flush with the car, and if the car got dirty, you couldn't see the taillights anymore. But with these three-dimensional taillights, the outside would get dirty, but the inside was still visible enough. The cars behind you could see your lights coming on and off. That was the idea. And then it later just became a signature style of the brand. I have a funny story about this. On my 1984 300 SD, it has a similar taillight pattern, and I had been away on a trip. And while I was gone, I had had my car cover on the car. And when I got back, I'd seen that there had been lots of wind while I was gone. So the car cover was almost blown away. But one of these teeth here, if you will, had literally grabbed onto the car cover and had saved my car cover. So if it wasn't for this taillight design, my car cover would have been the next block over. So thank you, Bruno Sacco, and I love these taillights. Finally, I want to tie this all back together to Southern California and Mercedes-Benz and its presence here. This neon sign is a replica that we just commissioned this year, but it's actually a 1-to-1 scale replica of the original dealership sign that was in use in the 50s at a place called International Motors, Inc. on Sunset Boulevard. International Motors was started in 1946. It was basically a place where you could find very niche, small European brands in the years following World War II. And they moved around a bit, they expanded, they opened different showrooms. But in the early 50s, in 1952, they started to sell Mercedes-Benz. And there's a picture in 1953 of somebody installing this sign on the roof of the dealership. In 1953, they start taking deposits by customers on Mercedes-Benz vehicles. And after a little while, these customers started to ask where their cars were. Well, these customers, once they didn't get the answers that they were looking for, started to actually contact Mercedes-Benz in Germany, ask them, hey, where are our cars? Just wondering, did you ever actually receive an order from this dealership? And they said, no, we have no idea what you're talking about. In 1954, the whole thing came crashing down because the three people that were in charge of International Motors Incorporated went to jail for fraud. And that was the end of International Motors in 1954. But the sign remained. It actually moved 1 mile down the street and was repurposed for the brand new dealership that was opening just a few months later called Mercedes-Benz Hollywood, which was around for a very long time too. Well, I hope you enjoyed this short tour of world-class 100 years of Mercedes-Benz. This exhibit wouldn't be here without the help of Autumn Neary, Kristen Fay, Johnny Eisen, Michael McCardle. All of the placards, all the text panels that are in this exhibit were thoroughly researched, written, and curated, and I really would just want to give them a thanks in this video here. Once you come in person, you will see cars that we didn't discuss today, and there's all sorts of rare, unique items and artifacts that you'll have to come and see in person. So until next time, I'm Shervin at the Petersen Automotive Museum, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.